deafening silence. And all of a sudden in 2019, with the, our book publishing April 14th, Plague of Corruption simply started when we, as we discussed before, when we realized it was the vaccines and the xenotransplantation, and really corruption, as the government over decades, not just a few years, has covered up the infection, the contaminants and the adventitious agents, and how they're driving the chronic infectious disease, cancer, really this explosion of disease in the vaccinated that's not, not supported in the unvaccinated. They're not sick. So because of liabilities and the freedom from liabilities from the 1986 Vaccine Injury Compensation Act, our experiences in Plague of Corruption, as we served with expert witnesses in the vaccine court associated with that act, where the victims are compensated for the injury. That court's paid out $4 billion or more, as you know, and that's only representing, from the best estimates, 1%. So that the details, the data and everything supports that the why now is because COVID-19 is in fact a plague of corruption to cover up these infectious adventitious agents, and the clinical data that we talked about in depth last time supporting that, the ventilators, the masks, why these are actually driving the disease. People are being buried and called coronavirus, COVID-19, as a single agent cause of this pandemic, if you will, and it's not at all, because we talked about it great detail last time. Koch's postulates are Hill for a microbial agent to cause a disease. Everyone that's infected has to get the disease, and of course we know that's not true. So throughout my studies, you see with SARS-CoV-2, because most people that get exposed are healthy. Only the sick with comorbidities are at risk of dying from the infection. So you don't die, and the example I use is, if you can have AIDS, HIV, and never get AIDS. And that's what my PhD thesis changed, when we recognized the immune system and how that causes disease. We know the same things being said in the case of COVID-19, but it's all turned backwards to now this coronavirus alone is the causative agent of COVID-19. And all of the data say otherwise. And in fact, a lot of the clinical data say the XMRVs are involved, other adventitious agents from vaccines. The people who are susceptible are the vaccine injuries, because now, and those will be, those 25 to 50 million Americans will be the ones who die if they're inoculated with anything, really, with the flu vaccines, which are driving this COVID-19. That's published data. That's nothing I say is my opinion. What I say is clinical data, biological data, molecular data, and I really can and have supported every word of it in 2 books and for decades of work with other viruses and how they cause disease.
And you shocked me last time when you said 50 million Americans would die if we went ahead with some of these vaccines. And I thought 15, and then it was 50. And I spoke to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny last Friday, and she said, yeah, Brian, that's what Judy is saying. And that's in America. And she continued to reiterate that was only in America, not to mention worldwide. So there are quite a few high-level doctors that agree with your assessment. I just had a thought. I mean, if it wasn't for this COVID-19 crisis and lockdown, would we have heard your name, or would have this just been never commented on, and it would have been very quiet still? I mean, did this crisis and the rise of Fauci allow people to recognize who you are and then quiet you? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I thought about it a lot, because, of course, a Plague of Corruption was going to come out anyway, first slated for November 5th of last year, but then we learned a little bit more about it and delayed in order for Bobby Kennedy, who understood at the environmental toxin level so much more about other top level scientists who were silenced by our government over the last 50 years when they discovered inconvenient truths about vaccines. So yeah, the publication of Plague of Corruption, certainly I expected, because it's so clear and so easy to read. People might have heard my name, but certainly not the level of the scientific attacks. The Washington Post back again with the fake news, the Wall Street Journal, my people that participated in the fake science news, uh, defamation and spinning the story that XMRVs do nothing. They're not there. They're all gone. We took care of that, so you could see the media, both the science media and the mainstream media, saying exactly opposite things. So XMRVs, all a hoax, goes across Good Morning America at the end of 2011, 2012. We took care of that bad Judy Mikovits. Yeah, we took all of that then. So the disease, the sick communities, of course, knew my name, and of course they were targeted as they are now. But yeah, no, I think I really do think that the explosion, what the book shows, what the data reveal, and then COVID-19 was really a desperate act to cover up those 40 years. Because again, if we bury everybody and call it COVID-19, and it has nothing or little, if anything, to do with a coronavirus, the testing's fraud, then you'll never know the XMRVs. You'll never know the adventitious agents. The country will never know. They'll say, oh, it was like the Spanish flu in 1918. So I firmly believe this is a carefully orchestrated pandemic, and that's what I said in the movie. And everything over the last decade, as we've discovered more and more corruption, it didn't start yesterday, and I really think they hit the detonate switch, and that's why these measures are being taken, because everything will kill the susceptible, and they will bury them and never know. Nobody will ever know that it was in fact the XMRV. So where is the real hoax? And really the data support that COVID-19 is the hoax perpetrated to cover up the truth of the XMRVs.
And for people that are
No, not as familiar. What does that term mean, XMRV?
Well, it means xenotropic, the X. The M stands for murine leukemia virus. So there are mouse leukemias, mouse cancer causing retroviruses. And so the RV means retrovirus or associated with. So XMRV is a xenotropic because it's not in a mouse, it's in a human. And it's related at the strain level to mouse cancer and neuroimmune disease like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, containing family of viruses, which are called gamma retroviruses from mice. And so to make it, to correlate that with SARS-CoV-2, so that means severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus number 2, because it's most closely related to SARS, not as closely related in a strain sense to MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus. So the XMRVs are a family of viruses, gamma retroviruses, the class, that are endogenous to mice, monkeys, birds. They're gamma retroviruses, but the murine, the mouse type, was what was first found and identified as sequences in 2000, and I believe it was published in 2005 by Joe DeRisi and Bob Silverman. And those are key parts to the story, because they had in fact never isolated the virus, and we did in 2009, and showed it wasn't just a single strain of virus, which they never are. And that's how the words and the science gets twisted, and how the journal again last week attacks me by twisting words. So it's propaganda masquerading as science when we use terms like it and they and the don't exist. And so what does it mean when you can't replicate studies? They're families of viruses, they're strains of viruses. They come from, many animals are infected with the families of viruses, many animals have different kinds of coronaviruses.
Okay, good. And we're
actually go in and go head to head with some of this criticism from Science Magazine, and you've got a presentation that I think you've given before that we're going to screen share and actually just show the proof, because this is an information war. I mean, I'm starting to see that. And look, just, Judy, I'm new to this, I mean, I was blown away a couple weeks ago when Bobby Kennedy was on, and I started learning about vaccines and started learning about the protocols and the liability laws. And I've further been brought up the curve with Dr. Buttar, speaking with you, speaking with Sherry Tenpenny, speaking with you again. Dr. Buttar's on again tomorrow. And I've been flabbergasted by what's going on. And I come from a science background, so I can kind of understand how normal science is done, and it doesn't seem to exist here. And I'm starting to see this kind of what you're talking about, this plague of corruption, this kind of it's almost like, it's been co-opted by a group of people that it's in their interest for it to remain the same or to not be made public. And that's what you're saying. And I think people need to kind of understand that scope. And look, I can't wait to get into some of these pieces and also share the presentation. You've also had a lot of problems these days with, you're getting hacked left and right? Even your websites and your emails. Just talk about that right now. And where do you think that's coming from?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's planned to silence us, as you just mentioned. A group like Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, like Dr. Buttar, like Bobby Kennedy Jr., Del Bigtree, people that have been working in this area, in this group for 20 years. We're all working together, and when another scientist from another visionary viewpoint comes out and starts revealing more, then everybody is interwoven. And because you're showing these things on YouTube, and because people see the science, and when it's explained to them like we do in our books as sixth grade science, and you can show how the media skews, it's not the work. It's not the investigations, it's what the editors and the journals are saying about the science. So I think people are starting to realize what we're being told as a community is based on, and that's the hardest thing to realize, fake science news, this cartel of the granting agencies and your publications determining your career, and we're censored, we're only allowed to look at a little bit. So I gave this presentation in its entirety at the Truth About Cancer live symposium last October in Anaheim, California. So I've been showing it since that time in various formats, and it's detailed. It kind of follows the book Plague of Corruption in what we learned and why it's there. It's almost an expose. But now all of a sudden, last week, when I sent this slideshow and our book electronic version to Martin Ensering by email, he wrote me, "Oh, dear Judy, hope you're doing well. Really, you had me jailed. You ruined my career. You want to know if I'm doing well, and you haven't talked to me in 8 years. And all of a sudden, here we are. You're asking me for comments in Science Journal." So I didn't write "lovely to hear for you" or anything like that. I simply emailed this slideshow and the electronic version of the book. And so I believe it was commented on in the Science magazine. So since he didn't recognize that I was taking verbatim what they said, and all of a sudden, as soon as I presented the data, and Charlene Bollinger did a longer expose a few weeks ago at the Truth About Vaccines, supporting me right after these Washington Post and Science the articles, defaming me and libeling whatever they were doing to me once again. And then everything started getting censored. Charlene, Truth About Vaccines, Truth About Cancer. This slideshow just 2 days ago was taken off our own website, and we were told we couldn't use this slideshow anyway. So what don't they want you to know?
How can they take a slideshow off your own website?
Yeah.
All right, so that slideshow is going to be put on our website right below this video. We're getting it up right now so people can look at it, and we're going to share some pieces of that today. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're going to share some pieces as they answer the question. We'll
Yeah, we'll get to the questions first.
And I'll start to go through some of the things that they brought up. Is it worth talking about, Fauci right now? And,
essentially no, because and we'll talk about it only for the second of, and that's where we could actually start sharing this screen, and that could be the last thing we say about Fauci right now.
Okay.
So this slide was probably the third slide in this slideshow, and what you see here is what you see here on the left-hand side is an invitation-only meeting. And this was chapter 8 of our first book. It was a workshop, public health implications of XMRV infection. And so it basically says, hey, there's so much data coming out that look like there may be a real problem with this new mouse-related family of retroviruses. And they invited from every level of the government and academia, you see on the left-hand side, experts from the divisions, from the CDC, the FDA, as you would when you suspect an agent is going through a contaminated blood supply, as HIV did. And so here and this was July 22nd, 2009. So 4 months before our paper, which we submitted on May 6, 2009. So that long a time while everybody vetted our data and everybody confirmed our data and nothing was shown wrong in the study. And then it came out with extreme fanfare. Well, Tony Fauci's NIAID, he's shown here at the NIH Clinical Center right there at NIH. Next to him on the right-hand side, I'm pointing to Francis Collins, the head of the NIH. Tony Fauci is the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. And here is Harold Varmus, who in 2011 was brought back to head the National Cancer Institute. And that's significant because these studies were done in collaboration with my lifelong mentor at the National Cancer Institute. And what they're doing here with Hillary Clinton in 2011, and this, by the way, is after they shut down XMRV politically and as a hoax. So the who and the why you can only come up with that what I told you before, and that is because these are the diseases. So everything with an asterisk has been in multiple publications associated with retroviruses, including this family or closely related family strains of these retroviruses. So I said 21st century acquired endocannabinoid because they hurt our endogenous cannabinoid system and immune dysfunction, so different kind of AIDS than HIV. And I said unintended consequences of unsafe vaccinations and schedule. So what's important about these diseases is they are here's a 2010 quote from a meeting with a lifelong or a 20-year veteran, Suzanne Vernon of the CDC. And so after that September meeting where I showed not only more disease associations and more chronic fatigue syndrome, I also showed that there were other disease associations, including autism, including ITP. And so what she said was, after that conference, when the blood supply of London was contaminated, and Francis Collins there ordered Tony Fauci to fund a large multi-center validation study. And that's what we're talking about now. That was September 11th of 2010. And I said, well, she said, agency heads are scared to death if XMRV works out. And the question why is because in 1991, it was 1 million Americans infected with HIV. And in 2010, between 10 and 25 million Americans were infected with the XMRVs, which likely got into humans from contaminated blood and vaccines. So that's the big why. And so what are these people doing here? Well, they're giving an award to these investigators for cannabis drug development and research. I believe it's in Israel. It's certainly not in the US. I believe this is an Israeli researcher. I mean, they do fabulous work, but our government holds the patent since 2004 on cannabis natural plant therapies. American investigators can't do this research, and we're sending tax millions, if not tens of millions, of tax American dollars to, and these would be curative therapies for the XMRVs. So that's the who and the why.
Okay, and what is that? What is that?
Prove that they refuted that this isn't the cover-up. This isn't that he masterminded the entire cover-up. We didn't address that there.
No, and in fact, this was the group that in 2009, again, 4 months before the paper was published, heavily vetted, said, yes, this is a huge public health issue. So this is a huge public health issue. These people came in because of the cancer. Harold Varmus came back from where he, and took a $2 million pay cut, annual salary pay cut, to come back and run the National Cancer Institute because of the cancer implications of these studies. Because in these other presenters at the invitation only meeting, at the July 22nd workshop, were other investigators who found similar viruses in other diseases like cardiac disease, like prostate cancer and other cancers. So they're calling together experts saying, we have a huge public health problem. And then 4 months later, after they completely checked our work, our paper was published, and the work of some of the others on this list. These simultaneous papers came out in September and October showing, yes, XMRV, we isolated the virus. All our papers said for the first time, so all we knew since 2005 there were sequences of the virus in men with aggressive forms of prostate cancer. And we appreciated the biology, the immunology, the susceptibility factors were an enzyme that degrades RNA viruses.
I'm trying to understand what you just showed me on the screen. What does that prove? And do they just disagree that that meeting existed, or disagree that that conclusion was made?
Yeah, so they never mentioned this meeting and the fact that our paper was so heavily vetted. So then Science goes on to say, so it was vetted before it was published, heavily vetted, more than any single paper, I think, because of the implications, and then came out to great fanfare. And then the problems didn't come where they started taking, attacking me and the messengers until the implications became so much bigger with the contaminated blood supplies and the vaccines.
Understood. Can I get into a few of the things that the Science magazine talked about? Yeah. Okay. I think one of the big things they said is that you would claim that Fauci masterminded the entire cover-up, and Science magazine said, and I'm probably paraphrasing, but I think we've got it right, it's not clear which fraud and what cover-up Mikovits is talking about exactly. There's no evidence that Fauci was involved in a cover-up or that anyone was paid off with funding from him or his institute. No one has ever been charged with fraud in relation to Mikovits' allegations. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so Tony Fauci funded, so Francis Collins said, we need to do a large multi-center study to confirm what we were saying. And as soon as our paper was published, because of the implications of a contaminated blood supply, just as in HIV/AIDS, as soon as our paper was published, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, which is not under the direction of Tony Fauci, started doing studies to develop tests to identify the virus in the blood supply. So the cover-up was the was the way the studies were done in Science, the journal, and by the other investigators, not only by the NIAID of XMRV contaminating the blood supply and the vaccines, but because that study was what the multi-center study that was we started the study design on November 4th of 2010. It was that study that Francis Collins ordered to be done when the London blood supply, where I got control samples, had 4% of the controls positive, as opposed to, and here in our original paper, we said 3.75. In Harvey Alter's confirmatory paper that was published in mid 2010, they showed 7%. So the big issue here, and why Fauci and spearheaded the cover up, is because Francis Collins, his boss, the head of the NIH, all of the institute, said we must fund a multi-center study to look at the disease associations. And this was the study that was corrupted by the study director of the study, Ian Lipkin, and I do have a few slide I can show how that works as far as excluding the appropriate patients and then limiting the findings that we were able to do based on wording really that had nothing to do with the study. So you can see how the study was corrupted. So and this was, I was held as a fugitive, a felony fugitive from justice, arrested in November 18th, 2011. And I do have the quote from Science, the journal, that in fact says federal agents were the only ones who could have. There was no warrant, there was no arrest, there was nothing. But that was when I was supposed to be participating in the validation study, doing the isolation, doing the things I did as the principal investigator on the original study. But Tony Fauci said, put that felony from fugitive from justice at the NIH, at the NCI, in the laboratory. So I couldn't do the study because I was called a fugitive from justice. So I did virology by telephone and tried the best I could, because I knew we would get positives in the study, because even though 3 of the centers or 4 of the centers were not valid patients according to the disease signature, that's the publication I also sent that you could post. There's a disease signature, just as we see in COVID-19, of these viruses. So this is,
you're being, is this when you're being held without charges and what they dispute, or is this a different piece? Because
that's when I was being held in 2011. Yeah, I was held in jail for 5 days, as we discussed before. All the while, our paper is being force retracted from the journal, because they've lost confidence in me. Oh, now I'm supposedly stealing things. Now I'm supposedly but what Tony Fauci did, he stopped the validation study. 1, he kept me out of the labs. And 2, and I show Harold Varmus there, because the study design, Harold corrupted the study design by ordering that the infectious clone, which was not what we isolated, that infectious synthetic clone, which way overgrew the samples, he insisted some samples be spiked with that. And so then it would have said contamination. So at every level of the people in that picture, there's a corruption and a cover-up. So when against all odds we would have validated our original paper, Tony Fauci stopped the study, said we're wasting too much money. He applied he directed Ian Lipkin, the senior investigator on the paper, to apply a statistical program to say anything we were finding in that last cohort was in fact contamination, which it absolutely was not.
Okay, so this is how they are covering it up.
they obviously said there's no evidence and there's no funding and no one's been charged in fraud, and you're saying, yeah, this is how they did it. So basically you're explaining how they did it in a way that wouldn't show evidence that Fauci did this, you know, and so I see what you're saying. All right, so you're showing how they did it with this explanation, and that's obviously something that Science Magazine is saying, oh, there's none of this and this and that, because they're actually not addressing your specific arguments.
Yeah, they're not, and in fact, I can, in that paper, so then they link in that article the press conference. So here's how they corrupted the study. We were only allowed, and this I'll go back to the slide for just a minute for this. We were only allowed to say, because of the title of our paper, and this makes it a lot easier, and this is how manipulation of data happens, because we were only allowed to say that, and it matters for the title of this paper so you can understand. So our paper originally said detection of see the word an infectious retrovirus called XMRV. Again, DeRisi and Silverman had identified sequences in prostate cancer patients, but they never isolated it. And so that's what's critically important. So an infectious retroviruses that they had called, they said they discovered it, they held a patent on it, they made a synthetic infectious molecular clone, which is standard procedure, but the virus hadn't been isolated. So it says of an infectious retroviruses. And our paper, I highlighted there, taken together, these demonstrate for the first direct isolation of infectious XMRV, it's not plural at the time, from humans, and implicate a role for XMRV in infection in the pathogenesis of CFS. So we didn't say it caused it. We said it implicates a role for it, and that's the original abstract of this paper. Well, 6 months later, and it should have been shorter, Harvey Alter confirmed our studies.
Okay. This is good.
This is going very into the detail, and I still have about 6 or 7 of the things I just want to get your counters with Science Magazine. Can you maybe?
Let's do that. Okay. That tells you, because that's a real key. The title of that paper is how they twisted the study. We were only allowed to find VP62 because Bob Silverman said it was VP62. It was that sequence that we isolated. And in fact, they made the mistake. They forced in sequencing our strains, it wasn't VP62. It never was. They held the patent. So we, in fact, had discovered and done the real isolation of a new family of viruses. And this is how it got all confused, because we were only allowed in the confirmation study to say XMRV VP62, and that virus was a cloning mistake. It was synthetic. It never was in people.
So this allowed that further cover up to happen because of
specific point that was made here. Okay, that makes sense. And now I also see.
Okay, and now I also see, without you being specific,
it's very easy for not only mainstream media, but even a magazine like Nature to kind of gloss over this.
They're not virologists, and mainstream, and in our book, Plague of Corruption, everybody can wake up because of the way Kent Heckenlively writes it as a 6th grade science teacher, and understanding. And so it's the understanding, it's how the words are twisted.
Okay, all right, that's starting to make a little bit more sense. All right, let me just go through a few more of these so we can knock these out. The origin of coronavirus is the topic here, and science says, okay, Dr. Mikovits says the virus was not naturally occurring. It occurred in labs in Fort Detrick, North Carolina, and the Wuhan lab. Science says that evidence indicated that the CV19 virus originated naturally in bats. Its quote-unquote distance in evolutionary time to other coronaviruses is approximately 20 to 80 years. There's no evidence this bat virus was manipulated, although last time you and I were here, we talked about this 800-year amount that you said it would take to get to this virus. Comment on this, please.
Yeah, it's simple. The paper in 2015, which discussed the emergence, said that it was funded by NIAID, and it was a collaboration between the North Carolina lab, the Wuhan lab, a lab in Switzerland, and a lab at Harvard. So that paper said in the material and methods, we grew the virus in the cell line Vero E6. That's a monkey kidney cell line that contains HIV relative simian immune deficiency virus, contains gamma retroviruses, including XMRVs, contains other monkey viruses and closely related simian virus 40. We know that because we grow our polio vaccines in that cell line, Vero monkey kidney cells. The methods say that they grew, the Wuhan lab grew the virus, grew the coronaviruses, mixed the bat tissues with the coronavirus, with the cell line, and grew up a 200-liter fermenter or whatever it was of coronavirus in the monkey cell line. By definition, that's not natural evolution. That didn't jump into another small animal and go right to a human. You mixed bat cells and bat tissues and took the viruses to a Vero E6 cell line, which doesn't have type 1 interferon. So it's a little virus factory. That's not natural evolution. Simple. And it came from Fort Detrick. And they sent the cells to study, because that's how you can't study a virus unless you can grow it. So every time you grow a virus in a cell line, you change it. I didn't say engineered, it changes it. It picks up other viruses. They didn't purify that virus away. We don't know what is in SARS, in COVID-19. We don't know how many passenger viruses like the XMRVs, like simian virus 40, like Mason Pfizer monkey virus, or mixed cell focus forming viruses, which are family members of the XMRVs. We don't know because nobody ever tested it. And that's what I said in the Epoch Times. It's like looking for your keys in a lamppost. Clearly what we're seeing in COVID-19 is not what a coronavirus does. SARS-CoV-2 is not the only agent, and that's what's clear from HIV studies. HIV doesn't cause AIDS because you can have HIV and never get the disease AIDS. So you cannot say that SARS-CoV-2 is the causative agent of COVID-19, because most of the people who are infected with that virus don't die or even get any kind of serious disease. So what is causing all these clinical things? That coronaviruses don't cause microvascular leakage or bleeding disorders. That's why I said the other disease associations, because what does? Oh, XMRVs. So let's go test and see what else is in there. But clearly not a natural evolution if you grew it in a cell line. That's not natural.
And do they just not understand the science by saying that? Or
they're just twisting the words to make it sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. And I do, because I did that work.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about.
Okay, vaccines, let's jump into this. They said, you said that on the CV-19 vaccination in I think the movie Plandemic, you said, and you told me this, they'll kill millions, as they already have with their vaccines. There's no vaccine currently on the schedule for any RNA virus that works. And you said the same thing to me in our last conversation. This is what science says. There's two things they said. First of all, they said, vaccines have not killed millions. They've saved millions of lives. Many vaccines that work against RNA viruses are on the market, including for influenza, measles, mumps, rubella, rabies, yellow fever, and Ebola. That's the first thing they have. They have a second thing, but let me get you to talk about the first thing.
The first thing is that vaccines, there's no data to show that vaccines save millions of lives. And in fact, there's a tremendous amount of data to associate the 21st century vaccine schedule with those diseases and deaths. As I said, $4 billion paid out in vaccine court for SIDS deaths, for flu vaccine deaths in the elderly from cardiac arrest, from many other things. And these data are, the vaccine court is of course corrupt. That's an entire chapter of my book. The evidence and the side effects of these vaccines. ITP kills millions of people every year. We firmly associated ITP with MMR vaccination and with XMRV infection in 30%. So we're clearly this is the big cover up from the society, from it to the society, and it's clear, as we were talking about the influenza vaccines driving COVID-19, that those papers are published, and many vaccines drive different pandemics. So the important thing about the cover up. The second question was, forgot what your second question was.
What was
many vaccines that work against RNA viruses that are on the market, including for influenza, measles, mumps. We talked about this last time. So what do you say to that?
Right. So RNA viral vaccines, MMR doesn't work. What do I mean when I say the measles vaccine doesn't work? It doesn't provide memory immune responses. And in fact, worse than that, the difference from a natural infection, where I had a natural infection well before the measles vaccine came out, because I'm older than that. It came out in 1963, and that's not MMR. So well before the measles vaccine came out, I had a natural infection, and we know I have lifelong immunity. What we see from MMR, from the measles vaccines right now, is that in fact, the people who have been vaccinated are anergic, meaning not only do they not make memory immune responses, they don't produce antibody at all when re-challenged with measles. And you can see that in the recent outbreaks. It's the vaccine strains that are circulating and causing disease. The same thing's true of influenza. The CDC itself admits that the influenza vaccine doesn't work. So why do we eject people every single year? And they say, oh, we missed the strain. Well, if you've ever had influenza or you've ever had the vaccine, it targets the conserved epitope regions of the various strains, the conserved regions. And so those vaccines from strain A, strain B, why do we continue to give those every year along with a good healthy dose of mercury, which does cause death, cardiac arrest, and these neurological diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's disease, driving things. So no, they don't work. They don't provide memory. They don't provide lasting immunity like a natural measles infection. I've never had an influenza vaccine, and I've had the flu, and I never get sick. And so that's what the statements are made about. But of course, not a single study has been done since 1986 on the safety or efficacy of the vaccines of MMR, and those vaccines. The only vaccine that I would ever take is the rabies vaccine. So they mentioned that. And why do you take the rabies vaccine? In spite of the horrors, it causes a lot of problems and a lot of damage, because the disease is worse than the vaccine, and you've already been exposed. Why are we giving tetanus shots to 2 months old? Are we dropping them on rusty nails that have cow manure on them? How tetanus spreads? No, you don't need a tetanus shot. So, and that's not an RNA virus, but there's no memory. That's what I said. It's clear from the outbreaks there's no memory. And because they've never done a single test or a single experiment that shows they do work, they can't say they don't. That what I'm saying is not true. We don't have a test not in 30 years of anything on the schedule or the combination. What we do have is independent investigators that showed you how much garbage was in that MMR4 vaccine, was in that MMR4 vaccine. If you'd like me to pull up a slide of exactly that vaccine,
Yeah,
you can see the comments. Okay.
And
but while I have you on this topic, Judy, has there ever been a vaccine that worked in human history? That's what I want to know.
I think that the data support, you know, that they don't. Because, you know, that if so worked means, so for instance, the flu vaccine is not intended to prevent infection. It doesn't develop neutralizing antibodies. It ameliorates disease. The polio vaccine is another RNA virus, enterovirus vaccine, we haven't, you know, natural polio was eradicated because of clean sanitation and other things, not necessarily the vaccine. Just like MMR, the disease incidence, the natural herd immunity was happening anyway, and yet we give the polio vaccine today, and it causes polio. The CDC renamed polio.
okay,
So here's the contents.
Tell me what's on the slide, and then we'll come back to your explanation. So what do you
this is the contents. This is the contents of the MMR vaccine that an independent study showed. So there's independent analysis shows the content of endogenous retroviruses, horse anemia viruses, bird leukosis viruses, many retroviruses here, that the viruses are adventitious vaccine contaminants, potentially dangerous. And then you have human fetal DNA from the MRC, from aborted fetal tissues in that vaccines. So nobody can say that's safe or that's not driving disease. And you're going to make an immune response to these things. And it's crippling our immune system, and the clinical data support that it's allergic, that it's rendering allergic. That means the immune system simply can't respond, and you've lost your ability to respond.
You done with that slide?
Yeah.
We'll get back to you. Okay, so
that's what's in that MMR vaccine. And again, you know all these acronyms, but we don't all know them. But that's that measles vaccine is what that MMR is, right?
Right.
Okay, now just to finish on what you said about has the vaccine ever worked, and I know that's a very general question.
But you were talking about polio and et cetera. What is that answer? That final answer then? Has it?
If we don't, why do we continue to give polio vaccinations? If they're doing more damage than harm, because polio has largely been eradicated in the United States. Why do we continue to inject a live attenuated polio virus? Because the only polio caused in this country has been from the polio vaccine. And you cannot say it works if you've never done a test. So how can you say it works if you've never done a test? So diphtheria. You know, there's no diphtheria circulating. There's one case in the country every 10 years. So you can't say that's because of the vaccine or natural herd immunity. We can't make a scientific statement if a study has never been done. So they can't defend that they do work and provide lasting immunity and have done anything when all of the epidemiological data say the viruses were gone before the vaccines were applied. So it's like this COVID-19. Everybody's immune. Natural infection and herd immunity has already occurred in Sweden and Korea, in places who didn't lock down. If you have antibodies, that's all that's measured for a vaccine to get approved. Do you make antibodies? And I will say they haven't even been measured, So we know in measles, the anergia, that measles amnesia, a paper that was spread through the Washington Post in the mainstream media back last fall. Measles amnesia. You know, measles infection gives you amnesia, so you have to get vaccinated again. No, The vaccine never developed memory. And I say quite clearly, you can't remember. You don't get amnesia. You don't forget what the immune system never learned. They don't work.
Okay.
Now, you said Sweden and Korea have herd immunity. We don't know that, but you think they might.
The data support that the people have antibodies. Same with here in Northern California. The antibody testing is showing IgG, which means a past infection. And it doesn't mean those people won't be re-exposed, but they'll have that immunity. They won't get as sick than that last time. And most of them aren't getting sick anyway, which is why you can't say it's a causative agent. Everybody with the virus has to get the disease. That's how causation is marked. That's why we said in our paper in the beginning, associated. We didn't say causation, but science twisted it and said, we said implicates that virus in that pathogenesis. That's not causation. And you see, this is how the words get twisted.
Okay, let me talk about them not ever testing these vaccines.
The reason they say they don't is because of ethics, right? That we can't go ahead and test this because if we give it to people who don't have the virus, then that is actually not fair. That's not ethical. Is that correct? Is that why they don't do it?
It's one argument for the vaxxed versus unvaxxed study, but again, it's that simple safety testing is done. Is the garbage that's in that shot I just showed you, is horse viruses, bird viruses, other people's human fetal tissue. You've got cancer-causing fetal tissue from these cell lines, MRC5, these aborted fetuses and things like that. You've got cancer-causing mouse, monkey, bird retroviruses. That's not tested. That's not safe. It's not just the vaxxed, unvaxxed study, but clear that not even safety studies, they're not cleaned up of the garbage. That's the problem. People think a vaccine, and I did all the way until 2014. Our first book, my major emphasis of our paper was the contaminated blood supply. I'm not the scientist who wrote the opinion paper that said the most likely way mouse viruses got into humans was vaccines, because they're adventitious agents. The government has admitted that since 1995. So again, we're talking apples and oranges. It's not, you don't have an attenuated enterovirus. You don't have a purified coronavirus in saline, or a piece of purified coronavirus, an attenuated, a weakened coronavirus in saline that you're exposing by a natural route of infection. You're injecting a needle full of other viruses. God only knows what's happening, the cytokine storm they drive. And that's the point. They don't want to know because they've never done the testing. And of course, the unvaccinated study, there's nothing unethical at all. Measles is not a deadly infection to a healthy 5-year-old child. That's what I had. And I have lifelong immunity. I'll never get shingles unless they stress me out, because I got a natural chickenpox infection. These are harmless childhood diseases in healthy people. We used to have chickenpox parties. We used to have measles party, so the whole family gets it. That's what the herd immunity would be in coronavirus. We should be in families, having the healthy people out, protecting the sickest, the vulnerable, with the natural product therapies, the vitamin C, the healthy living, the clean. That's the simple definition. And the history really does approve all of it. And it's not me talking. It's Dr. Suzanne Humphries, who goes into a great deal about, the whole polio, the whole measles vaccination. You can chart it. You can see her book, Dissolving Illusions, another good book. You can see Dr. Jack Lyons Weiler's book, Profits versus Cures. The clinical data support that these vaccines are, in fact, killing millions with cancers they would otherwise never get. And because of the immune dysregulation. That was my last job at the National Cancer Institute, which from in 1999 to 2001, HIV associated cancers, other viruses that take hold and that are activated in the immune system when you have an HIV infection that goes unchecked. So you keep it silent. We didn't vaccinate HIV infected people until 2011 with any vaccine, influenza, anything else. Why? Because you don't want immune activation. You don't want them to wake up the HIV infection and spread it through the white blood cells. That will cause AIDS. That's what we learned. That's the point. Why did we start vaccinating again in 2011? Why are we publishing papers like measles infection when it's not a natural infection at all? So we're not using, just like they didn't do in the validation study, they're not using the same patients as we found in our original studies the virus in, just like they're not using me. Use me. I got a natural measles infection. And then we'll show if I'm allergic. Let's look at the immune system. There are large unvaccinated populations, and I believe it was the Mawson study that showed some natural populations in a DTaP experiment, the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated. And with DTaP shots, cause of all death was 5 times more in the vaccinated. So these studies really must be done, and you can do them. There are many people like me walking around with natural chickenpox infections, and in fact, in Ronald Goldman's studies with chickenpox, with the data in a community in Northern California, proved that the vaccine doesn't work, that it doesn't give a memory response. So I use simple terms, doesn't work, because the whole idea is to protect you from disease, or protect you from disease development, or ameliorate the disease, make it less. Flu vaccines don't make disease less. You're giving them to immune compromised elderly with with all that garbage in them. I just showed you MMR, but there's similar garbage in flu vaccination. And again, they're never tested because they don't want you to know that. But the data support clearly that the populations who are getting vaccinated had a greater susceptibility to COVID-19, to coronavirus infection, and then disease development from that, because the point of a vaccine is to turn on the fire, turn on inflammation, stimulate your B cells, T cells, macrophage, dendritic cells to provide the immune response. And that's the flame, the same signature that is the signature of COVID-19. So why would you turn on the flame in the susceptible? And everybody reports. I mean, our friends say, oh, I never get a flu vaccine again because the last time I got one, I was so sick. You know, that happened to my mother in 2012, and it ultimately killed her. She developed, the flu vaccine and the Prevnar vaccine she was given because she didn't want to ask me because I just got out of jail. Killed her ultimately. AFib, afibrillation. And this is what we're seeing in COVID. So people that are dying are being called COVID, and they're not dying from the coronavirus. They're dying from the vaccination. And I'll stand by that, and I could prove it if they'd ever let anybody do the study.
Let's go on to the second point that science says, and that's on
Dr. Mikovits, you being anti-vax. They said in another recent video, Mikovits is wearing a hat that says Vax 2, which is a sequel to the film that links the mumps, measles, and rubella vaccine to autism, a debunked theory, they say. She also repeats several claims made by people who are leading the anti-vaccine movement. In the PowerPoint presentation she sent to Science, she calls for an immediate moratorium on all vaccines. How do you reply to
that? Yeah. What does the movie The Truth About Cancer show? That's why I wore the hat. It's the people's truth. It's when you interview the vaccine injured and you see the next children as the parents learn. I'm not anti-vax. I spent my life making immune therapy on the single hypothesis that you can educate the immune system to prevent and treat infectious disease, AIDS, and cancers associated infections. And that's what our work did from understanding the immune response in HIV. We changed it from an infection you can live with and you'd never develop the disease. So why I wore that hat is because when you look at the people's truth, when you watch the movie, when you learn that the doctors in the movie, dozens of doctors said, no, we weren't educated about what's in a vaccine. No, we weren't educated about anything but the schedule, the untested schedule. You know, that it's never been tested. When I make drugs for cancer, every time I add an ingredient to a protocol, let's just say I'm making a chemotherapy with 3 things. If I use adriamycin, I have to test it in double-blind placebo-controlled studies. That means saline, inert placebo, sugar water, something safe, no vaccine, and then, or no drug. And then I add another, say cisplatin, to that. I have to test cisplatin alone, adriamycin alone, and the 2 together. These vaccines are not co-developed that way. They're just thrown 6 things like Pediarix. Pediarix is IPV, the injected polio, grown in those monkey cells, along with DTaP, along with Hep B, and they're just mixed together. They're never tested. So how I respond to that is, so what you're talking about, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. And these people aren't either. They're ex-vaxxers. Their families have been injured. Their children have been killed. And that's what you'll see in this movie. And everyone should see this movie, because Science Magazine, that's not science, folks. You're just attacking us. When you let our families be abandoned, and that's why I put that hat on, because I lived through HIV. I remember the quilt on the mall of the people that were killed when the drugs, the safe drugs like peptide T, never made it to market. We can see the same corollary with hydroxychloroquine. Why can't we use a safe drug? Why is it anecdotal with peptide T and you can skew the clinical trials to keep adding people to remdesivir because you get the patents? Why are people denied the cures, that would say the viruses cause the disease in autism? Debunked is not disproven. It's just character assassination and cover up. And the movie Vaxxed 1 clearly shows William Thompson, we just kind of threw away that data and those data and made the association go away that Black boys given them MMR before 3 years of age were 4-fold more susceptible, more likely to get autism. And all you had to do was wait until they were after 3 years old, when those data were clear, and what you did was whitewashed and removed the appropriate patients. Well, that's exactly what they did in the XMRV studies. Just remove the right people. It's like, it would have been like trying to isolate HIV and associate it with AIDS in the early 80s, and you didn't use gay men, IV drug users, or prostitutes. You'd never find the virus. And this is what William Thompson did in Vaxxed, the original movie. And Vaxxed 2 is the people's truth. You can see the families that are injured. You can see the doctors say, no, we weren't taught anything. No, and when the doctors wake up and when they're educated and they realize these aren't magic Pez dispensers, there's no placebo study, there's nothing done. That's not science. That's character assassination. Fine, I wear that hat proudly because I'm here to protect those victims. If I can convince anybody never get another shot until that 5-year moratorium. Why did I say 5-year moratorium? It's going to take at least that to test the schedule, at least that. And during that 5 years, what are we going to find? Oh, wait a minute. People are actually healthy. People actually don't develop food allergies. 50% of our kids with asthma. We're going to see this autism go away. And when it goes away, you know what caused it.
Right, and this is what you called for last time, which was a 5-year moratorium on all vaccines.
Start, and while we study them, or why we just let it not happen for a while.
Right. Why we test it.
Yeah. So I had a candid conversation with my 75-year-old father on Sunday, and he's a smart guy, Caltech trained engineer. He actually doesn't watch the videos necessarily that I put on this channel, so he's not biased in any way. And I said, Dad, and he studies all the science, bit of a career in biomedicine, and did some things with biomedical devices, so he's not completely foreign to this stuff, but he's not qualified like you. I said, Dad, are you going to take a vaccine if they give it to you? And he paused long and hard, and he said, probably not. And he's the kind of guy I would think that would. And he said, my concern is this, is they will never test this vaccine on anyone my age or anyone with maybe any kind of compromise. They'll test it on these healthy people, and he said, I'm very worried about that. And then I mentioned what Bobby Kennedy said. He said, at the max, it's going to be 40% effective, on the max. And what it probably is going to have is all these other issues, side effects, mercuries, all these other dangerous, agents in there. And for a guy that I thought was going to be corralled right into the vax movement, he was like, nope, I think I'm just going to be staying at home. And I was surprised by that reaction. What do you think of a reaction like that?
Well, I think that's the reaction of most intelligent elderly people like myself, like my husband's 81. I mean, he was told he had pneumonia and he has COPD in his 30s. He was told get the vaccines, and he kept getting sicker and sicker. So about 5 years ago, we stopped it all, and he's never been healthier since that time. He's never been healthier since I met him. So intelligent people are starting to look at the data that's coming out, saying, yeah, well, it doesn't make sense that if the commercials we see on TV, as you age, your immune system weakens, so you get 4 times the dose in the elderly. Well, that makes no sense. You prevent exposure. You don't inject 3 different weakened, or attenuated flu viruses. They're not weakened if your immune system is weakened. They're strong to you, and the vaccines are killing people. So what I think about that is that's why they have to do the COVID-19 and roll out the mandates. It's like, and roll out. That's why the big push right now, you're not getting back out of your house until you get that flu vaccination. Just did a case last year of a mandate in vaccine court. 87-year-old man, had the usual problems of an 87-year-old man, high blood pressure, some other things going on, some frequent urinary tract infections, which are inflammatory, by the way. In order to go to his clubhouse at his retirement home, he had to get the flu vaccine. 24 hours later, he's dead. Very clear the flu vaccine caused that heart attack. And the court said it was natural causes. And again, the court is part, it's a whole chapter of the book on how corrupt the whole system really is to cover this up.
And if you watch the mainstream media now,
just literally corralling everybody towards the vaccine pen. And I think when people hear that word vaccine, everyone thinks of this, story you were told as a kid of this like little needle, and it goes into your system and it's 100% effective. Even if you think of the movie Contagion, right? They put this innocent little saline solution up your nose and then you're okay. Everyone's okay, and it's smile and happy and everything's back to normal. And from just having a few conversations with people like you and Bobby and Dr. Buttar, I know that that is far from the truth. And I feel like if the public just realized that, it's just far from the truth that that's even a reality, that they would snap out of this. And yet they don't so far. And it seems the governments continue to talk about this as the only solution.
Yeah, and it's fake news, as you see, because that's the only thing science had to say about me. Did you say anything about everything I said in that slideshow? No, all you did was bake it about anti-vaxxer. And again, you cannot say I'm an anti-vaxxer because I spent my whole life developing immune therapies, and that's what vaccines are, to prevent and treat chronic disease. That's not an anti-vaxxer.
And we're going to have that slide presentation right below here on LondonReal.tv/Mikovits. Let me get into the last few things that they mentioned, because I want to get into it all. Wearing masks. They say, Dr. Mikovits says, wearing the mask literally activates your own virus. You're getting sick from your own reactivated coronavirus expressions. Science says it's not clear what Mikovits means by quote-unquote coronavirus expressions. There is no evidence that wearing a mask can activate viruses and make people sick. How do you reply?
I said you activate a lot of latent infections, not just coronavirus infections. So again, they twisted. Yes, you activate those endogenous retroviruses, those 8% of your genome. You wearing a mask if you got the flu vaccine, you're concentrating the influenza that's being shed right there. You're passing it to other people because the mask doesn't protect anything. And the mask significantly depresses your CD4 T cells, your memory immune responses, and that's published literature. It's shown they don't prevent transmission of influenza, and so again, with the coronaviruses, which are even smaller than influenza viruses, they go right through it. You're concentrating it, you're taking toxins in, you're stressing your immune system. Stress is powerfully immune suppressive. You wake up lots of viruses, not just, and coronaviruses are in every one of those vaccines, just as I showed you MMR. Birds, fish, horses, dogs. I said the Italian vaccine was grown in dog kidney cells. That means it had coronaviruses of many strains. I didn't say SARS-CoV-2 because there's no evidence, but again, they won't do the proper tests and show anybody, or you would see whether or not you woke up your own endogenous elements. And it wasn't necessarily coronavirus my statements were directed to.
Okay.
Fair enough. Let me get on to the next point. They said that Dr. Mikovits says that just as far as commenting on the global lockdown, closing public spaces, no vitamin D, no beaches is insanity. Quote, you've got sequences in the soil and the sand. You've got healing microbes in the ocean and the salt water. Science says it's not clear what Mikovits means by sand or soil, quote unquote, sequences. There's no evidence that microbes in the ocean can heal COVID-19 patients. Your reply.
Yeah. COVID-19 is, my first job was isolating natural products from marine organisms, from plants, from around the world, from the soil. The group went around the world it was the fermentation chemistry program of the National Cancer Institute. They went around the world taking soil samples and things like that. When you have fungal sequences, when you have mushrooms, when you have, see all kinds of animals, their sequences, both antimicrobial and microbial, are right there, and in your skin are natural boosting. We isolated many antimicrobial agents from the sea, from plants, from sand. We know there are a lot of things like tetanus sequences and sequences from other organisms. Had nothing to do, again, with COVID-19, other than you don't lock somebody in a house in order to keep their immune system strong. These sequences boost your immunity. The vitamin D boosts your immunity. The sunshine, the warmth, they kill any exposures you have, and you're boosted as you walk through the salt water. There's the minerals are healing. Think about the zinc, think about the micronutrients, everything about what they're doing to keep you distanced. Coronaviruses don't spread through the air. You cough them in water droplets. It's like Ebola. It's not like measles. And then I showed in that slideshow what the government actually said in 2014. So if the same thing's true, again, the mask is concentrated. It's not stopping the spread, and the social distancing is insanity as far as it has nothing to do with public health. You don't lock bathrooms down. What ended some of these infectious diseases? Oh, clean sanitation. So we lock men down from people from bathrooms for the 150 miles I have to drive between my office and my home. Really, that has nothing to do with public health, and it will drive disease. And again, COVID-19 has little to do with the coronavirus and everything else to do with the other environmental toxins and they themselves defined it that way. We're going to just define this liberally, anybody with a cough. No, I'm healthy people not coughing cannot possibly give you a coronavirus. From 3 feet away, 2 feet away, 1 foot. If you're not coughing, you're not by definition sick. You're not an asymptomatic carrier of a coronavirus. You clear a coronavirus. You develop immunity, and the next time you're exposed, you have that protection against getting sick with the antibodies. You clear it. You don't carry it. It's not a retrovirus. Or is it? Probably it is, because of those XMRVs and those other contaminants they're not telling us about.
Okay.
A couple other things. You mentioned the hydroxychloroquine, which President Trump has now admitted that he's taking. And you had been saying that, look, it's been shown to treat CV-19 and they're stopping doctors from prescribing it. Science magazine said the medicine has never been proven to help with CV-19, and its overprescription is now causing there to be a shortage of the drug for conditions that have been proven by the FDA and needing the drug. Your thoughts?
Oh, so we've locked down the entire world, and and other conditions needing the drug were running out. It's not, a 2005 paper with SARS and MERS showed, in fact, hydroxychloroquine did have benefit in preventing the disease from developing if taken early enough with other family members, just like we talked about before. Oh, so now they're trying to protect all those other people who take Plaquenil and other things for arthritis, and the FDA doesn't tell you that it used some forms of hydroxychloroquine low dose, just as you use for arthritis, were actually diagnosed and could be bought over the counter, and the FDA put that behind a prescription wall just before the outbreak of the SARS-CoV-2. So my thoughts are, again, it's propaganda masquerading as science, and what kind of statement is, oh, the people that really need it aren't getting it, and it doesn't do anything in this disease, when clearly hydroxychloroquine was used to shut down the deadly Ebola outbreak of 2014 by a smart doctor who treated it. So again, this is all just fraud. Oh, those people aren't getting it. You're so worried about the over 80 that you're not giving cancer drugs. Our clients aren't getting their cancer therapies as their disease could spread because they're not allowed to travel. The masks are making our cancer patients sicker. Every public health thing is hurting cancer patients. 2,000 people die a day of cancer, and they're worried about, oh, how worried are you really? Open back up the country and give the hydroxychloroquine and the type 1 interferons. I talked about type 1 interferon. I talk about natural therapies, anything we can do to boost our immune system. And then all we have to do is protect the most vulnerable in our population. So they're clearly not worried about them. They're clearly worried about covering up this narrative and driving us into mandatory vaccines because that's the only solution that's going to be allowed.
What do you think about
President Trump taking hydroxychloroquine?
Thanks, great. We got some here. Well, I give it to my husband. I've got interferon on the table. Yeah, because that's how you prevent disease development. It's not going to hurt anything.
one of my
doctors and the guy that's been on the show before? I talked to him very early on with this, maybe very early on, 5-6 weeks ago, and that's the one thing he said. He said, Brian, that's the one thing I've been given to people who show signs. He said, it seems to be really working. That's the only thing. As before anybody was talking about it, he told me about it. So,
it has for years.
Okay, got it. And by the way, I just want to let everyone know,
we'll be clipping this video into pieces, and there are going to be links below. So if you want to share, some of these small pieces of conversations about the different things that Dr. Mikovits is talking about, you can do that on your social as well. We mentioned the charges before. We should talk about it again. They said that Dr. Mikovits said you were held in jail without charges. Then Science said the district attorney in Washoe County, Nevada, filed a criminal complaint against Dr. Mikovits that charged her with illegally taking computer data and related properties from WPI. The charges were dropped in part because of legal troubles faced by her former employer. How do you comment on that?
Well, that's real easy with another screen share, because in fact, that's not what Science the Journal reported. That's not why I was arrested. Here's what Science the Journal, John Cohen, actually published the day after I was arrested, November 19th, 2011. Sheriff's in, huh?
Can we just zoom in on that photo or make it?
Yeah, I got it. So,
okay, great.
So it says right here, and this is controversial CFS researcher arrested in. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. Go ahead.
Right here in the middle, I'm pointing to it because Science the Journal kind of designed this narrative to take me out a long time, and all of those are on the side. But right in the middle, it says, sheriffs in Ventura County, California, arrested Mikovits yesterday on felony charges that she is a fugitive from justice. That's not stealing notebooks. That's not the district attorney. She's being held at Todd Road Jail in Santa Barbara without bail. Science Insider could only obtain sketchy details about the specific charges against her. The Ventura County Sheriff told Science that it had no details about the charges and was acting on a warrant issued by Washoe County in Nevada. A spokesperson from Washoe County Sheriff's Office told Science Insider that it did not issue the warrant, nor did Reno, nor did Sparks' department. He said it could only have been from one of the several federal agencies in Washoe County. There never was a warrant. There never was a charge underlying the felony charge for fugitive from justice. And this is exactly what those federal agencies who were scared to death. Again, we're going to start the multi-center study that proves everything I said. So what does it say at NIH by Tony Fauci? She is a felony fugitive from justice, and that still stood the last time I was at my National Cancer Institute laboratory, or I tried to get to Fort Detrick, November 15, 2015. So that completely refutes what he just said. There were no underlying charges. There never were. The district attorney of Washoe County, and we filed criminal affidavits and lawsuits against and a civil law ketam whistleblower lawsuit in as soon as we could, November of 14, criminal lawsuit that was held under seal by the corrupt Nevada and the federal agencies, the Attorney General, the FBI. They all admitted it. They held it under seal. That means nobody can you can't tell anybody you have a lawsuit. And then the Monday after I gave this talk last October, all of a sudden they dropped that lawsuit. Said, no, it's dismissed. You failed to serve the people. And I had to file lawsuits pro se, that is, as my own attorney, had to get people to help me. But this work was validated by my then attorney, Mike Hugo, who wrote a 1983, this is USC 1983, 42 USC 1983. It's a constitutional rights lawsuit. No due process, no warrant, no anything, let's just take down Judy Mikovits without a single charge. And that's what my comment is to that.
Right. I appreciate that detail, and it's very helpful having that PowerPoint.
Is there anything else on that presentation that is necessary to show people right now that's relevant?
Not really, because it really refutes everything that Science, the journal, said. So their own magazine didn't go and discuss when I sent him to, when that was my reply to Martin Enserink, who also slandered me, defamed me, wrote inside editor stories during this 2-year period. Yeah, so there's really nothing else there except proving the journal Science, awarded, literally my employers had misappropriated federal funds, had done unvalidated tests when we were doing those blood supply studies, and Harvey Whittemore is a convicted felon, from 2012 for campaign contributions to Senator Harry Reid. So all of this is in the 1983 study, and here this embattled institute keeps the grants. So there's your $5 million and more, because they've been paid to this day. Everybody that participated in the frauds, in the blood group working group, in the Lipkin study, as soon as, and we call it the Lipkin study, the multi-center study that was published September an October issue of MBio 2012. It says right there, no evidence of XMRV infection. And in fact, table 3 said from the Rossetti Mikovits lab said 6%, 6.1% in patients and controls. What that meant is still, that's 25 to 50 million Americans infected with XMRV. We validated our original paper, and had Tony Fauci left the Montoya Center had left that last center from Stanford in the study and not insisted that Ian Lipkin apply statistics to make the association go away, just as they did to William Thompson and in that corruption of MMR. So it's all a plague of corruption. So then you applied statistics. Let's stop wasting $2.3 million when we have 50 million Americans infected with contagious, many strains of contagious cancer-causing viruses that they got from a contaminated blood supply and vaccines. Let's stop wasting that $2.3 million. Really? When we've got the entire country shut down, these are the people that will die if they get infections. And I say they, but it's me. They infected the lab workers. They knew the first responders, the military. They knew the lab workers. I'm talking contagious. And they called it unintended spread of a biosafety level 2 agent. No, it wasn't a biosafety level 2 agent. It was an infectious, contagious gamma retrovirus introduced into 25 to 50 million Americans for 30 years, unchecked, causing disease. And these are the people with the very disease association. You can hear my lung issues. You can hear my, and boatloads of virus, the lab workers. We can't afford to retrofit our labs to biosafety level 3 to protect our lab workers from new generated viruses that they showed themselves in subsequent studies in 2013, 14, showed themselves the envelope protein alone drove metastases, the most aggressive prostate cancer. The envelope protein alone can cause Alzheimer's disease. And we've injected these envelope proteins, injected the whole blueprint, the whole virus. And that's what they're planning to do with a COVID vaccine. And that's why they're driving these influenza vaccines that will drive the infection, not only in the HIV infected, in the XMRV infected, in the injured with mitochondrial deficiencies, with low glutathione. They can't possibly, that's autistic kids, regardless of the infection. They can't possibly do anything other than get hurt by any shot ever again. And that's why, so that's why they defame and they character assassinated, but they took this PowerPoint down. They dropped that case with all that evidence. I can send you every single file, every case we filed. I did defend that with Michael Hugo, who called me and asked, and I said, yes, please use what you wrote the last time, because he was stopped from defending me, and it's a chapter in Plague of Corruption. So again, no due process, cover up, cover up, cover up. Now 10 years. Now you got a big problem because you got caught. Plague of Corruption shows they got caught. And COVID-19 is not a coronavirus. Yes, there is one. Yes, it was manipulated in a lab. Yes, it was released. Yes, it will trigger. But the people it will kill are those 25 to 50 million Americans that you've already damaged now for 3 decades in your untested, unsafe, known to be contaminated vaccines.
Judy, we've seen you attacked pretty much everywhere. I think after our interview, I saw your name in the New York Times a couple days later, Lord knows, debunking you. But at the same time, while that's happening, do you also feel like people are hearing what you're saying? And do you feel like people are having these conversations? I guess I'm trying to ask you, are you hopeful?
Oh, I'm very hopeful. The last chapters of the book are all about hope. Because what these revelations, that the people can see it, that they are locked down right now, seeing, well, wait a minute, we never wore masks before. We get all kinds of infections and common cold. Why do we need to wear a mask to go to the grocery store? This doesn't make any sense. Why would you shut a bathroom? So people are seeing how ludicrous the statements are and how weak, just like Science the Journal. That's your defense? Really? Let's debate a little science. It's easy. That's what I do for a living. I mean, or at least I did do it for a living before, is debate the science. So yes, I think people are waking up, and I'm hopeful that with President Trump doing things like trying hydroxychloroquine himself, just like your father. No, I don't think I'll ever get a shot. Because when people see this and when they hear, from me, I'm not speaking science terms. I'm speaking to people what we can see. Watch the movie, The People's Truth, Vax 2. Look at the doctors who say, this isn't just me. You heard Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. What, 20,000 hours? Vaccine Research Library. She showed at this same meeting last October, she showed even more of the garbage, of the cow material and the material that's in these shots. I had no idea. So we've got now everybody's banding together. I didn't know Dr. Buttar. I was, of course, working with Dr. Tenpenny for the last few years, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys for the last 5 years. My experiences in vaccine court, this slideshow, if your audience looks at it, if your audience learns liability free, wait a minute, they've never been tested. This is the golden age. We can stop the whole plague of corruption with those simple moves on that last slide. 5-year moratorium, nothing, not a flu shot, not anything from today. Whatever President Trump can do June 1st, not another vaccine. Go back and do your homework. No more liability protection for Big Pharma or anybody else. And the 1984 Vaccine Injury Compensation Act. It's corrupt. Reorganize the CDC. Close the CDC. Close it until the corruption is cleared up. Fire these officials that have for 4 decades perpetrated these crimes. Everybody that committed those 3 papers are fraud. That's federal crime of fraud to publish what science published. That John Cohen, Martin, they should be in federal prison for fraud. What happened to me? Extortion by Tony Fauci. And this is what we put. It's extortion to tell somebody you're held in jail until you sign an apology that said you made a mistake and XMRV doesn't exist. It's an extortion to sit somebody after they just got out of jail and they're held under criminal charges at a press conference and say, look, Judy, VP 62 never was there. And I said, I never said VP 62 was. And how they twisted it. You have to put this to bed. It isn't that. And say it isn't that, and then you'll be allowed to have your life again. We know, and we've got quotes from these people saying it's clear from Dr. Mikovits' presentation at the New York Academy of Sciences, March 29th, April 11th, and another NIA workshop. It's clear there are other strains of these viruses associated with these diseases, just not that one. Well, we didn't make the infectious molecular clone. We didn't do the sequencing mistake, and yet there they are. They paid Bob Silverman in grants and Joe DeRisi. They win awards, and yet Judy Mikovits is the only one, because I refuse to let people get injured and make XMRV go away. Judy Mikovits pays the price and is never again allowed to work. $15 million, intellectual property theft. I stole my own brain. Here's my notebook, the only one I have left from Dr. Rossetti's office. 30 years worth of work. It sounds like I stole a grocery bag versus stuff which I never laid my hands on or my eyes on, after October of 2000, after I was fired September 29th and my lab locked down. This is Mickey Mouse. We showed this and other notebooks to the FBI agent 5 years ago. I said, whose is this? It comes from I go to seminars and journals. It talks about IL-6. It talks about CD4 cells. It talks about, here you are, 13097. Here's the meeting of the macrophage importance in HIV that we went to, the Delta 32, everything we learned. That's what I was accused of stealing. That's how they twisted it. So 30 years of work, my PhD thesis, everything in those offices. We didn't have the internet then. They stole my entire life's work and then said I never did it. And thank God for my colleagues, because, you're required by federal law to keep copies of all data in which you participate on a grant. So the hope is that we can reveal all this truth if we ever get the chance, because we have all of the data. We refuse to be William Thompson. We refuse to throw away those samples. I can go right back to that multi-center study, even though Ian Lipkin himself said they found 86% of the Stanford sample group positive for the XMRV a year later, a year after my life's over again. So did they keep their promises and say, we're going to let you come back? You know, that's why I sat at that conference. None of us thought it was VP62. That was synthetic. I said that from the day our paper came out. There's a difference between isolation and synthetic. This was the first retrovirus family in human history to be sequenced before, to be cloned before it was isolated. And that was the big mistake, you know, and it wasn't by me. It was by our co-author, who continues to get tens of millions of grants, as do everyone who participated in this fraud.
Let me ask you a question about Donald Trump. What do you think of his
reaction lately? He talked briefly about disbanding the coronavirus task force. He's obviously pushing to get the country back to work as soon as possible. What do you think is going on in his mind? What do you think he really thinks is happening here?
Well, I think he really knows exactly what I'm saying. I think when he can see that this task force has ulterior motives, because it really doesn't take a rocket science. It doesn't even take a scientist to see that there's no sense in keeping people off a beach and out of the sun, and keeping people who are compromised locked down and losing their job, driving depression, taking us away from our churches. You can't do calisthenics on a beach or yoga standing in place. That's not public health. So disbanding the task force would end this plague of corruption, make it go away, let everybody go back to work last week. We'll take care of the sick, we always do, but let's use hydroxychloroquine, let's use vitamin C, let's use type 1 low dose interferon. They're right there. The prophylactic, pre-exposure prophylactic measures can be done right away. We don't need clinical trials for that 70-year-old drug that we know is safe, use low dose, short term, where, you know, you use it later, it's not the same thing. So these studies are designed to fail that are being done now. It's pre-exposure. It's just past exposure, before disease symptoms envelop. Get that zinc in there, that you're using the pore of the hydroxychloroquine. You know, again, look at how that outbreak of Ebola, not a coronavirus, Ebola, you know, that's a dangerous virus, killed 21,000 Liberians. That outbreak was stopped cold with the right treatment strategy. And of course, then the convalescent doctor and nurse who got sick had neutralizing antibodies. I've seen paper after paper after paper of neutralizing antibodies. So I think Trump is doing the exact right thing, end this thing. He really should, you know, arrest and fire these criminals that have put these measures on, because they're killing so many others. And we've changed, you know, our world needs to go back, take off the mask. I can't go to a farmer's market today and get healthy food. This just has to end.
I think when Trump is talking about vaccines, do you think part of him is saying it because if he disagrees with it right now, that it'll be too controversial, and also that a lot of funding for elections come from pharma, but then that he really doesn't believe it or think it's even going to play out into next year?
You think he's thinking that or not?
No, I mean, I hope not, because what can derail any kind of re-election if Robert Redfield, who's telling everybody, go get your flu shot at the end of the summer. You know, no, that'll drive the disease. And by November, you will see another outbreak, and they will be blaming President Trump because, oh, you let them all out too soon. No, let them all out. Let's do normal, natural herd immunity, natural healing, healthy, no more, you know, it's a cold. and it's clearly been through here, as Professor Cahill and others who are experiencing viral spread across nations by tracking. It's clearly been through our country a lot earlier than they said, only the most vulnerable are threatened, and the most vulnerable are being killed by the current measures. So I hope it's not a political agenda, and if he stops it right now and puts that moratorium on all vaccines, he won't see another COVID outbreak. He won't see another disease like this, and he'll be shown to be right by healthy people, and we can restore the entire health of our world when we, and our economy as well.
Right now, he is talking about a vaccine.
Did you hear him talking about that? Yeah. Okay. If you had 5 minutes alone with Anthony Fauci, what would you say to him?
I probably don't want 5 minutes alone with Anthony Fauci, because the last time I stood face to face and he talked about, we talked about, the children, these XMRVs, and how he stood there and said, I'm going to take care of people with a real infection. And just an ugly man screaming ugly thing at a person that just wants to have a scientific discussion and discuss real data. I'm probably not. I have no respect. Literally no respect, no reason. People that yell at people and attack people and stop studies and that reveal inconvenient truths. To me, he's just pure evil, and I hope never to see him again.
Okay, same 5 minutes alone with Bill Gates. What would you say to him?
Same thing. Bill Gates is not a doctor. He has no medical training. There's no reason for him to be directing whole programs. What he's doing has nothing to do with healthcare, and it's injuring and destroying the lives of millions of people around the world. So, you can show him what I say, but again, these men are evil, and it's just they're not people who I'd like to have a discussion with.
5 minutes alone with Donald Trump.
I'd really love a lot more than 5 minutes alone with Donald Trump, but I would simply show him that call to action in the slideshow. And I'm more than willing to testify in front of all Congress and show paper after paper after paper. Please, do the call to action on that last slide, and the NVICA. And the National Vaccine Injury Compensation, repeal it, repeal the Bayh-Dole Act, so that government officials who use taxpayer monies for discoveries don't patent them, so that big pharmas hold on medicine and therapies that belong to the people because the people have paid for them, and close the FDA. It keeps the cost effective therapies and solutions away, and drives towards, again, big pharma and the high cost of healthcare, and everything, and restore a brand new, reorganize all of it. And I would bring in people like Dr. Sherry Tenpenny and people like Dr. Stephanie Seneff with the glyphosate toxicity, people like Dr. David Lewis, who was the EPA whistleblower about the sludge and the toxins being put on our playgrounds right now, with the toxins in our environment. All of these people, bring them in and restore to America, to the world, a new age of health as we clean up our environment, as we clean up and restore the health to everyone, by stopping these deadly and dangerous untested vaccine programs, and allowing drug cartels like as exists right now.
Public policy, what would you tell them to do right now for the nation?
Public policy? Oh, everybody go back to work. These are not and take all these signs, no mask, no anything. We know how to prevent the spread of this infection. So public policy, just make sure these laws are in place so this can never happen again, because it's not a plague of disease, it's a plague of corruption.
And California Governor Newsom, what would you tell him?
He simply um, I think he should be removed from office. Again, the crimes against the people, against their constitutional rights, against their state constitution, SB 277, SB 276, the mandates on vaccines, on the childhood untested schedule, which says unless they get mandates, they don't go to school, they don't go to work. The same kind of things we're seeing right now. No vaccine, no job, no work, no travel unless you've got your card, your stamp. No, this is unconstitutional. We need to restore Americans' Constitution and our rights, peaceably assembling on the beach with your family members, with your friends who you've assembled with your whole life. Is again, to lock us down and stop us from walking down the beach where we're held at gunpoint, is against every constitutional law, and governors or states should not be allowed to supersede the federal constitution.
Encouraged by what you're seeing in Europe, people going back to work and schools opening and that kind of thing?
Yes, I am encouraged by what I'm seeing in Sweden and in Europe. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing in science as other investigators are using other simple therapies that are efficacious in treating the disease should it develop, such as chlorine dioxide and Dr. Andreas Klopfer in Sweden and Switzerland. And so, yes, I am encouraged by what's happening and hope that it continues to happen and people go back to work, go back to their lives. And the lesson we learned is this should never happen again. Not that there'll be another wave next year if we don't get a vaccine.
And Judy, how do you keep getting up every day and fighting? And how do you feel lately?
Well, if I can prevent one person from getting a flu shot this year, if I can prevent one person from ever getting a vaccine again, from one injury, I've done my job each day. If I can get that message across and have somebody take off that mask, that's why I get up every single day. If I can find a way to restore communication in science such that all debates are considered. I set up 2 meetings this week to just discuss with other doctors, other expertise, clinical doctors, like Jeff Galpin in North Carolina, who had criticized me, like Dr. Mike, who had also criticized me and was supposed to discuss on Patrick Bet-David's show either later today or tomorrow. They both canceled because they were told, either by superiors or anybody else that, I'm just crazy and we don't discuss these things. And so, can't we just discuss issues? And I'm reminded by one of my friends sent me Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, great minds discuss ideas, mediocre minds discuss issues, and simple minds discuss people. So can we simply go to discussing these science issues and realize the technology allows us to heal this? We could heal even those XMRVs just as we turned HIV infection into a disease we could live with. What's on TV? Pre-exposure prophylaxis. And yet we won't take that in any other way, shape, or form. Pre-exposure prophylaxis is the commercial PrEP for HIV people who, in order to keep their virus undetectable so they won't spread it. We just need pre-exposure prophylaxis and take all we've learned over these 40 years and apply it right away. And we can do that around the world. And that's why I get up every day, because every day more doctors, more people wake up and say, thank you. And maybe they take off the mask and don't faint or have a car accident because of they're not getting enough oxygen.
Yeah, well, I'm not wearing a mask, and I've refused to wear one, and I'm not going to get the vaccine if it comes out. And I was speaking with a conservative kind of political commentator named Candace Owens in the States last week, and she came out and said the same thing. I'm not getting a vaccine. It's not on the cards. And I think you're seeing a lot of people coming out and saying that, I think, which is super helpful to kind of put that line in the sand. And it's funny how you say no one wants to debate you, because I think Sherry Tenpenny was telling me on Friday, she said, you know, we used to go to these conferences and we used to have these debates, and she's like, the other side would come up and say, these never go very well for us, is what she said. And then they stopped debating.
So
Right.
it sounds like you just don't have a lot of people that do want to talk to you.
Right. But yeah, you know, we can't talk the science. You know, those aren't the people that called me from Science Mag. You know, let's talk the science. Let's talk solutions. That's what my work did for the blood supply. The minute we found the contaminated blood supply, we already had a solution, because a company came to us the day our paper came out and said, we think we have a solution. Well, that would prevent coronavirus contamination of the blood supply, as well as Zika, as well as XMRV, as well as HIV and HDLV1. So there are technologies that could decontaminate, but first we have to get the courage to stand up and say we made a mistake and move on, and take the knowledge learned, and we can make a safe vaccine, but we're not allowed. We can't. I can do that. I've given talks on Joe Mercola, and it's not just me. It's the technology. It's knowing the interactions. It's knowing what we know about the immune system and the disease signatures. We can use peptide T and the knowledge that we learn to stop the interaction of the macrophage and the T cell and prevent the transmission, so that the immune system will develop memories or slow it down with natural cannabinoid modulation of the therapy, so that you could turn the flame down your cannabinoid system, natural dimmer. So in the last chapters of the book, we talk about the solutions, and many scientists come to me and say, yeah, how about, you know, and we talk about deuterium depleted water. We talk about them preventing glyphosate toxicity, and getting that out of our environment and our food with Stephanie Seneff. So there's so many things we can do, and we are all working together, just as Sherry Tenpenny and Dr. Suzanne Humphries, Dr. Stephanie Seneff, everybody. We're all working together, and we'll be together this Wednesday, or this weekend now, the 20th through the 24th, at the virtual Autism One virtual summit, autism1.org. It's free to register. You can go hear any of these people talk, and heal with nutrition and heal with other therapies, you know, that can give some of these kids their lives back if we're really allowed. And that's why we have to stop the cartels, the FDA that prevents, and the WHO that prevents these medicines from getting to these victims.
Excellent.
Again, they can pick up your book, Plague of Corruption. I'm guessing you can still buy it on Amazon, or is it sold out again?
No, you can buy it at all major booksellers, and you can also go to unisonbooks.com/plague, and you'll get autograph copies there. So Kent and I autographed about 1,000 copies at unisonbooks.com and did a virtual book signing last week. So those are available as well. And we understand there should be at least 100,000 copies back in stock at Amazon and around the world. And hopefully everyone wakes up and says, okay, here's the solution.
You know, I walk around London all the time. I go out and train, and I meet people all the time. We shake hands. We talk about the madness of what's going on. We talk about the frustration with censorship. I mean, the people on the streets, I always say there's two worlds. There's the internet, and then there's the people on the streets. And the people on the streets, they know what's up, Judy. You know, they're watching, they're listening, they're questioning. They know this is wrong. They're watching their financial and economic status go down the tubes. They want change, and these are the people I see on a regular basis. So the message is getting out there. You should feel good about that. And I really appreciate you coming here. Again, if anyone's with us right now, share this via the links on the side to all your social media. And again, this will be up forever at londonreal.tv/Mikovits. There's also our previous conversation, which is equally as good, and we cover all sorts of other issues, and it'll just be on the left here on the sidebar. And also, we're going to have clips of this, probably 15 or 20 little clips that you could share, if you dare, on your social media, YouTube, Facebook, or on your whatever, your shadow accounts or your junk accounts or whatever, on your main accounts, or email them to someone or WhatsApp them to someone, and just get these messages out there so people can watch this. And we're going to keep doing this broadcasting. That's what the Digital Freedom Platform is all about. It's so we can have these conversations, and I'm not worried about looking over my shoulder, or it's going to get banned, or we have to not say how we feel. Like, I just don't like that. The self-censorship out there is crazy. And it's not okay. And people self-censor now around other people because they think they're going to be called weird and crazy. Well, I just want to say you're not crazy, you know, and we're talking about ideas. I love that quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. Let's talk about ideas. That's how we created this great, you know, this great human condition we're in now, by debate, by science. And I appreciate everything you do, Judy. I appreciate the fight. And, you know, you keep showing up every day and doing this. And I don't know how you do it. I don't know if I could do this for so many years in a row. So I want to give you credit and recognize you and applaud your efforts.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. I mean, everything you do, because again, that slideshow was taken down very quickly. And again, the misinformation going out. So everything free media can do to help wake up people around the world. And you certainly do that. As I said, the first time I knew of you was my nephew, who's 25. So he knows. And he's like, you really need to talk to Brian. And I said, I hope to. So now we'll have several more conversations. He loved the last interview. And so the kids are learning if the people are waking up, and you're a huge part of it. So thanks so much, Brian.
My pleasure. Let's do this again in a few weeks and check up with you.
And again, wishing you all the best. And I love how the rest of your group of doctors stick together. You support each other. You know, that energy goes a long way, and it means a lot. And it says a lot about you guys, as in you're about the ideas. And it's nice to just be a part of that and share all of your ideas here. So thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody for being here. And Judy, take care of yourself. And we'll talk to you very soon.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Okay, good. Thanks very much.
Everybody else, thank you very much. If you want to learn more about the Digital Freedom Platform, go to londonreal.tv/freedom. You can become a founding member. Obviously, share this episode. We've got other great episodes up. The previous one with Dr. Mikovits. We've got Dr. Buttar, Bobby Kennedy, and Dr. Kaufman, and Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, and a whole group of others, including the 3 David Icke interviews from this year. So thank you so much for your support. Sending you lots of love from London. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
At London Real, we believe that individual